how I get into it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Ready for the hard-hitting questions?
I know.
Everything.
All of it.
All right. Welcome, everybody. We are doing our roundtable discussion. We are going to kick it off with what made you start to do the work that you do. What was the experience or person or specific moment that got you on this path? And I'm actually going to hand this one over to Jeff.
Okay, well, I have an interesting story. So when I was about 11 years old, I went to the hospital. I had abdominal pain. I ended up having a ruptured appendicitis and had an emergency surgery. And then I was fascinated by medicine and the doctors and just really wanted to become a doctor. I ended up doing my residency at the same hospital where I had this surgery, and I ran into the surgeon that saved my life and told him, I know you don't remember me, I was a kid, but you actually saved my life. And we actually had a hug in the elevator with all these patients in the elevator. It was a great moment.
That's amazing.
It's a movie moment.
Yeah.
I wish I had gone first now.
We have to
Follow that.
Everything feels
Cool, what's the next question?
That one's good.
I thought this was an interesting one that was posed. How often do you get to talk to other professionals and fields outside of your area of work?
Well, my wife is a dentist. I get to talk to her a lot about dentistry, but not too often. I feel like, aside from, the community that's been created with FIGS, in the day-to-day you sort of get stuck in your field. That's why it's so enjoyable to do things like this, and you get to go to see the different perspectives, and you also get to see there's a lot of shared issues amongst healthcare in general that you can sometimes feel is only happening to you. So it's nice to get a step out of that. You're not struggling alone.
Yeah, I agree.
For sure. Where I work is a federally qualified health center, so we have medicine, behavioral health, pharmacy, like everyone's all together. So like I kind of get to talk to a lot of different people like concerning our patients. But outside of that, before I started that work, it was FIGS, the only crossing ground where we would intersect.
I would say the same for me. I mean, I think when I was in medical school, it was really through FIGS that I got to interact with other healthcare workers. But after I started residency, I had the chance to work with a lot of different specialties within the county hospital. And so that was very nice and eye-opening.
For me, the work that I do really pushes me to interact with a lot of different areas in the hospital. There's in pharmacy, you have behavioral health, you have the ED. You become a little bit more patient when things happen because you're like, oh, the world doesn't revolve around my field of work. It's like, oh, nursing is everything. I was like, maybe not. As much as it is. Okay.
Actually, based off of that question, I'm going to ask another question.
Look at that transition.
Because it goes right into this, which I thought was very interesting. Because all three of you feel like you work with other departments and you can see things a little bit different perspectives. Yeah. What is an issue that often flies under the radar that you want people to be aware of, or that you've seen that doesn't get enough discussion about the state of healthcare or the state of interworkings of and intersystems of the hospital?
So similarly, I think talking with people was kind of one of my favorite things to do, to kind of see how people are experiencing the same kind of life that we have in healthcare. And it was nice to be able to talk to people during school that were in different professions to see how they struggle as well. But a common thread that I see throughout is empathy burnout, or just burnout in general. And it's something that you don't know exactly what it's like until you go through it. And even when you go through it, you don't know that you're burning out until it's too late, kind of thing too. The burning out isn't like a thought you have, it's like how you feel and how you're doing. And then your mental health starts suffering.
Too far gone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I find that we all kind of go through it, but it's all kind of the culture of medicine, sometimes the culture of healthcare, is to sacrifice kind of your own well-being for the betterment of others. I think it's something that should be talked more about in school as well, like how to recognize when you're burnt out and what you can do to try to prevent it from happening, but also what you do when you are burnt out. Like, what can you do at then? Because sometimes you feel like you just have to keep pushing through it when that's maybe the worst thing you could do.
That's the culture of healthcare.
Yeah,
just push through.
Exactly. It's your best isn't what you can do despite your mental health. Your best is what you can do while you protect your mental health and your physical health, right? It's not like pushing through hardship or pushing through suffering. It's like, okay, how can I do this without suffering?
Oh yeah.
I would say same. Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be able, it's like they always say, you have to take care of yourself so that you can take care of other people around you.
Fill your own cup.
Yeah, exactly. Taking care of yourself helps you to have empathy towards the other disciplines that you're working with, which is so important because that makes a huge difference in like patient care, patient safety, and just how things are running in general. And I've seen that once you understand where the people around you are coming from and what their job entails and what they're trying to do, and they understand what you're trying to do, you're able to work together. And I feel like a lot of that is lost when you're burnt out.
And also, I think there's that lack of communication between those departments, between those teams. As I've said earlier, it's like we focus solely on like what we do, and the work that we do is very important, and everybody else's doesn't matter. You know, it's like, and as much as it seems very selfish, when you're in it and you're in the trenches, you're doing the work, why can't everybody do their job? And then nursing does this, and like, why can't they do their job? PAs, the dentists, like, but at the end of the day, we're all suffering, we're going through similar stuff, we're running through the same vein, and we just don't talk about it. Our suffering is ours only, and nobody else can understand.
Yet you're working towards the same goal.
Yes.
I think we often understand more than we give the other people credit for.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And I think that goes into the next conversation. We actually went into another part that we wanted to discuss, which was the mental health, safety, paperwork, things like that, what weighs on us most. And I think that given we just spent years in a pandemic and people are coming out of that and still not feeling great, not well supported, and haven't really had time to recoup because we don't do that well. There's no sick days really in medicine. When's the last time you took a sick day?
15 years.
When was the last time you took a sick day?
I don't know.
Exactly. I actually don't know any physicians that have taken a sick day in living memory. We push through everything. And so I think what you were saying is trying to change the culture at the time that you're being taught the system would be very helpful. But what are other things that we could do, even peer-to-peer, to help reduce that burnout and increase empathy and understanding? I think that's a person-to-person, like day-to-day thing.
Like, it's all individuals coming together to create a culture. You can't change other people, but you can start with yourself. Like, if you can have a healthy relationship with yourself and take care of yourself properly, that starts to kind of expand to other people as well. So I think, like, with time, culture will change, as it always does, but it has to be somewhat intentional of like self-care, self-love, like these things are important, and you have to believe that, so then other people will also follow that lead.
Yeah, and I feel like mental health issues in general, where like there's such a stigma behind it and talking about it, that now we're coming into an era where it's not as stigmatized. So like the newer generation is coming into the work field and they're just demanding more for their mental health. And I think that's great, you know, because they're the ones that are going to make a change in the future doing that.
I think that like we all go through, every field in healthcare goes through hard experiences. You see really tough things to process and go through, and if we're not processing that or learning how to process that as you go through training, it becomes tougher as you go along in your career.
What do you think some root causes for the decline in mental health are currently in medicine?
You got time?
Outside of the pandemic.
Let me get my list out.
Because I think the pandemic just unveiled what was already there. It accelerated what had been happening, and if a system's broken and then is stomped on, it's going to break faster. And so I think we saw a decline more rapidly, but it's not because it wasn't already broken. And so I think when you're talking about root causes, and I'm going to speak to something that I don't have a lot of experience in, but I've observed. And I think part of that, and the physicians here can speak to this as well, is that how we treat resident physicians is really poor, and it continues this culture of, I did this, I suffered, you have to do this, you're not going to sleep, you're going to get paid poorly, and you should thank us for it. That's something that I see as potentially a root cause.
Yeah, I think we've really been moving forward, making positive changes within residency programs across the country. And I think it's really taken people to come forward and say, these are the positive changes that we want to make. And with seeing that each year it gets better, comes with acknowledging that with each year, things may seem easier or better for the year after. And so I think it's working towards making sure that we continue to create that positive change.
I think that's hard for people. I think it's really interesting because I think it's hard for people who weren't treated well to turn around and see other people being treated better and not feel almost angry and gypped about that.
Because I feel like there's always that things like, I went through it, I powered through it.
Why can't you do it?
Why can't you?
Yeah.
As Mary said earlier, with the new generation coming in, there's more focus on mental health and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I think as the people who are currently in it, we have to be more purposeful in putting in effort to make change, because if we're just like going through the motions of each day, it's so easy to fall back into it. Like the people that you work with, your peers, would always be like, it's gonna be fine, it's gonna be fine, it's gonna be okay, maybe next year, or maybe we'll do that on the next survey, we'll talk about it on the next survey, which we're all like asked to do every single year. But if you don't say it right now, is it gonna make an impact next year? Because I feel like a lot of cultural change that happens in an organizational setting, and like I can only speak to that just because that's the world that I work in and live in. We always talk about engagement and culture of safety, and how much of that makes an impact for the practice in the next year, in the future. Does the feedback that we provide make a difference for the people coming in later on? Am I going to experience that when I stay long enough in this field?
Yeah.
We have to empower ourselves. We have to empower our peers. Like, hey, say something about it.
Yeah.
Because if you don't say something, no one's going to make that change. No one's going to push for it, because, as we've said earlier, we all suffer in silence.
I think there's a correlation issue as well. So when you go through something like residency or medical school, it's very difficult, it's very demanding, and it can be a huge stressor. One of the ways you get through it is convincing yourself it's necessary. Okay? The reason I don't have a social life, the reason I'm awake all the time, that I'm struggling, is because that's what I have to do to be a good doctor, because that's the way we're trained, like that's just the way it's passed down. And then if I don't do that, I will never be good enough. So then you get through it, and then you've almost subconsciously correlated it to that experience. So when you're older and you hear, oh, they're gonna get, they're gonna get make residency hours easier, they're gonna make the pay higher, you tell yourself, well, those are gonna be bad doctors, because you brainwashed yourself into thinking that that's what made you a good doctor.
Gaslighting yourself. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's the only way your mind can actually deal with it, is by justifying it to you. Otherwise, if you realize that, what makes me a good doctor is that I care. What makes me a good doctor is that I love the material. I went in every day, even though it was that bad, I went in every day because I wanted to be there, and I wanted to be a doctor. That's what makes me a good doctor. The experience itself didn't make me a better doctor. Getting to that realization is very difficult, because it sort of circles back to this constant feeling of the way the training is structured is to make you feel like you're just not good enough. You're almost there. You did well in college, you did well in MCATs, you did well in your first step, you did well in your second step. But if you don't do well in this third step, you're really not going to be a good doctor. So it's always you're just as good as the next test says you are. But in reality, if you can separate those two and realize, I'm a good doctor because I want to help people, and I'm interested in it. If I may have done bad in a test, that doesn't determine how good I am. I did badly in that test probably because I didn't sleep for 2 weeks because I was so nervous.
Or because you're working.
Yeah.
You're
and then you'll hear oh, they got rid of that test, so then you're you get angry about it. You're like, well, then how are they going to be good? But in reality,
I got traumatized. Why aren't you getting traumatized too?
Exactly. Yeah. You justify the trauma you just went to, because in reality, if you really look at it, and the truth is, you didn't have to do that.
Right.
I was going to say, I think what I found, now being an attending and having my own practice for several years, where I get to set my own hours and kind of work how I want to work, what I see is that these same types of problems are not just in medicine. So high achievers, whether they're CEO, they work in banking, there's a pressure on themselves and among peers to work 100-hour weeks and not sleep. And so one of the things that I do with my patients is understand that at the end of the day, we want to be productive and good in our work, whatever our work is. And sometimes we think working more hours is the way to be more productive, but actually the way we maximize our production can be exercise, sleeping at the right time, eating appropriately, not eating hospital food on 1 hour sleep and whatever. And so I think all the previous generations of medical workers had the same thing. There just wasn't as much social media, there wasn't as much discussion that allowed it to be seen outside. So there was just that paternalistic attitude of doctors towards residents, towards nurses, the horrible things that if it happened now we'd be shocked to see. There was no light shed on it outside.
So you think that's a good thing?
Well, I think
Having it like discussed more openly?
yeah, I think at the end of the day, like Adam was saying, we want to be good doctors, we care about our patients. When we feel like the reason we need to work 100 hours is to be a good doctor, instead of maybe if I slept.
It feels like to prove yourself.
Yeah.
Correct.
Like you're worthy
Yeah.
of this.
And in
there's so
some
many
ways it's sad
paths.
because it's when you put 100 really high achievers in the same room, they're competing with each other. So some of it, unfortunately, is actually the pressure that we put on each other.
Of course, yeah,
You know, too.
agreed.
Like especially in a society where being busy is so valued. That it is currency.
I'm busy. I'm busy.
You know, it's like
I'm busy.
so my calendar is
Yeah.
full. Like, you know,
Well,
You think you're busy?
it's like a Monday.
I just tell you that because I don't want to.
To get to the stage,
You have
to get to the stage
You have to be busy.
where you can apply to vet school, PA school, going to med school, to get to a stage, you had to been a high achiever already.
Correct.
Mary, I feel like I hear lots about the veterinarian world and mental health. What is your perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, like rotating internship, we were putting in maybe like 80-hour weeks, and we were like sleep deprived. We'd have to like round off patients similarly in the morning after like a really long overnight shift. Like it was, I feel like it follows really closely to like human medicine. Now I'm in a residency where I feel like I have way more of a balance, but I'm also a cardio resident, so it's like, you know, it's different from ER. I did ER last year, so I don't know. It's still tough though, you know, and it's something veterinarians struggle with. High suicide rates. It's really something that has been shared more often recently. It's good that they're shedding light on it. I feel like a major reason why this happens is like we have to deal with euthanasias, which human medicine doesn't really have to deal with that, but we literally have to go into a room and then have to deal with that and then go into a next one with like a puppy appointment. So yeah, especially in ER, it happens a ton. So it's like understandable why, you know, veterinarians might be struggling with that. It's also a lot of people during COVID adopted a bunch of animals, so now like, you know, we all have COVID babies, I think. I have too. All these animals are coming in and we're expected to see everything. Wait times are longer, people get angry, so we go through similar things as like I feel like human medicine does now.
What helped you process through as you were kind of going through that and starting?
Yeah, I mean, it's heavy, but I think at the end of the day, we were talking about, like, you focus on taking care of yourself, sleeping well, eating well, then you're in a way better mental state to be able to handle those things. When I was a rotating intern and I didn't have that time to do those things, I definitely was, like, not feeling great. But then that's when I would reach out to my intern mates. We were all, like, a little family. Or, like, my own, like, parents, I'd call them and just get support from them. So, like, having a good network of people is like essential when you're going through a really like rigorous training program.
What are some short-term or long-term changes that would impact mental health for healthcare professionals?
I think that receiving mental health support is something that you should have to opt out of once you start a healthcare career. Meaning, like, once you start working in a hospital or a clinic, you automatically are enrolled in like a mental health kind of counseling program, or you go however often you can choose maybe.
I really like that about the opting out of like healthcare services.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's like amazing.
Yeah, because I think there's still stigma around it, and we work in healthcare. We advocate for it all the time. You know, I tell patients how often, like, you know, you should go to therapy, and then like I was like, oh, maybe I should go to, you know, like what, you know, like
I didn't
You really need it.
I'm perfect. No, I'm perfect.
Well, I'm so good.
I don't need it.
Right, exactly.
but you
Exactly. The tears, I deserve these tears. You know?
I work hard for them.
Yeah.
I think that's such a good point, though. It's like about creating that emotional space for you to process the things that you're going through. And a part of that is like what you guys were saying. It's about the pressure that we put on ourselves to be better at each step of the way. And then it's also about processing the experiences that you go through. I feel like in each discipline in healthcare, you see things that are so hard to see, and you're supporting people through very tough parts of their lives. And even with COVID, I remember that was my first year of intern year, and my co-interns and we would have to pronounce stats for patients that we lost, and that was really tough. And you're working really long hours. There's not much time to process through what you're doing. you're talking to families who can't be with their loved ones, and things like that are happening within like each discipline within healthcare. There's something that you're going through that's tough to go through. And if we don't create that space to discuss it or to process it, it's really hard. And I think it adds up.
What was I going to say? Well, one thing I personally do that gets me through it is I think I like to mess around and like be silly a little bit during my day. So like in my office, the culture is like fun. We enjoy ourselves. I enjoy seeing my patients. I tend to have a close relationship with my patients. So like I'm seeing them, it's like seeing friends sometimes coming into the office. So that really helps me kind of get through the day. You see hard things. You have to tell people that they have cancer. You have to tell people they're going to pass away. Like I'm internal medicine, so I see the whole spectrum. Over time, maybe this becomes easier too, is that you realize that those are also beautiful moments when you know that you can be there for someone, hold their hand when you're telling them they have cancer or something. And so it's that we are very privileged to do a lot of these things too. And I think, you know,
intimate.
When we, yeah, like I don't ever try to see myself as like a victim of the place I'm at. I'm really happy to be doing what I'm doing. It's a privilege to do it. And so, you know, my normal job is I'm internal medicine, so people come to me for their annual checkup. But I agree that it's kind of weird. We take people's blood, and that's part of their normal checkup, and we, you know, listen to their heart and stuff. Doctors, because of the structure of the medical system where you have 10, 15-minute appointments, they don't have time to fully check in with you in terms of your mental health. And so, you know, that's part of the reason why not just doctors, but a lot of people don't get plugged into mental health before the breaking point. It's only when the doctor sees them in shambles that they're like, oh, you need to see a psychiatrist, you know?
Yeah, we often let everything go until we're like, oh, that should have been addressed a year ago.
Yeah.
And to be honest,
we
For
now have to
ourselves,
fix
too.
it.
Yeah.
in medicine, unfortunately, in Western medicine, that's true of everything. It's like we don't wait. We don't address your health and wellness. We wait till your blood pressure is too high and give you a pill. Or
Reactive, not proactive.
exactly. And so that's kind of the opposite of how I practice and how I see it. And I think it's hard to make everyone responsible to do that for themselves. You know.
Totally.
But if the system could help, I think that would.
But also, like, to your point about making sure like the space that you're working in is like fun and lighthearted.
Yeah,
like
I love it.
dentistry is so high intensity. Like people come in on 1,000, like already afraid, and so like I have to diffuse constantly. Like everything's going to be okay. Like you're fine. Like what's going on? Da 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 da. Like we're laughing in the chair to just like make it lighter because they're already so afraid.
They
So I
already
have
come
to,
in, it's like, I hate the dentist.
Yes.
I hear that all the time. Like, I hate you.
I'm like, me personally?
Don't take
Or what I do.
Thanks. So I'm gonna lean you back now. Like, it's just, it's
No
so.
pressure.
Yeah, like,
You're
no
trying to
pressure.
create, you set the environment, like you set the
Literally,
tone. I feel the
literally.
same way with ophthalmology, like no one wants the drops, no one wants the lights,
Yeah.
it's not fun.
It's super
but like you have to
intense.
set the tone and like create that positive environment for your patients and your staff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think setting the environment's key. All right, this is going to be a hot topic. I'm really excited to talk about this. Do you feel like your work is valued appropriately? Is the first question. We're going to follow up with how most health surveys say that we being healthcare workers are underpaid. That's how we feel. We feel like we've been underpaid, that we're getting paid less than what we're worth, and other industries are getting paid more. We'll go into the second part of that question, but do you feel like your work is undervalued or valued appropriately? Because I think it's a highly nuanced answer, and it's probably different for every one of us, probably, because we all work in different fields. I have a specific opinion on it as well, so go ahead.
I think
Oh, I'm interested, because this is, we're going Canadian here.
We're going to Canada.
Yeah, let's go to Canada. We're going to go visit
So,
Canada.
Canadians.
Okay, go.
Canadian
They won't see this in Canada. It's fine.
Tell
Value,
us.
just to, not just Canada, just to broaden it, I think things are valued usually by their scarcity. And I think that in healthcare that's a bit tough because just because there are a lot of us, like a lot of physicians, nurses, PAs, whatever it is, doesn't mean that they now should be getting paid less because they're less scarce. I think things should be valued based on what value they bring to society. And I think health, I'd be surprised to hear that most people would disagree that health is incredibly important. It's just that it isn't as profitable as other industries, so it's undervalued for that reason.
I agree and disagree with that.
please.
I agree with the fact that people think health is valued, but I think people agree that health is valued when they're about to die,
Yes.
Right.
or in their critical situations.
Yeah.
Otherwise, health is largely very undervalued, at least in the States. I also think that there's a lot of money in healthcare, and I don't think it's where people think it is. The people who are making the most money in healthcare are actually contributing the least. And I think that is the stem to a lot of frustration within healthcare. That's like the most succinct version I can give without going into big pharma,
insurance
the fact that
companies.
there's
Go
people,
off. Yeah, get into
insurance
it.
well, there's
Yes.
people making money, like millions of dollars in the top of hospitals that don't ever see patients and will never affect a life, but know the right people and somehow got the CEO position. We'll occasionally make calls. For instance, I worked at a university setting. A person like this made the decision that their friend should be in the ICU in the single bed that was left, and I worked in a level 1 trauma ICU in a burn unit. And there was a patient that needed to come to us that was a true patient, but this patient was a VIP patient that needed to go there who was completely fine, and the other patient died. That is how it could negatively affect it. So I think that, and no, we're talking about pay here, but I think that speaks to the power and where it lies and who's getting paid and should they be getting paid what they are. That is my issue with American
I think
health.
it sucks. The part that sucks is the who you know mindset also applies to medicine and healthcare, which it shouldn't. It's so unfortunate that that's the case. Money speaks, right? And in that case, that's where like the voice was heard. I'm the big boss here. Give them the bad.
Yeah.
And that kind of like minimizes everybody else's perspective on that patient's health, because it's like, to hell with your opinion and to hell with what the patient's status is. They need the bed because they're my friend.
Yeah, money talks. Do you feel like your work is valued appropriately monetarily?
I feel like I'm very lucky to be in a position where I've carved out a niche for myself, and I do get compensated.
You're in IT?
I'm in clinical informatics and performance improvement.
Okay.
There's a lot of clinical projects, and I like the impact of the work that I do. I've compared certain pays to like different organizations, and it's like, if I move to like even a bigger organization, I'll get like a significant pay cut. And it's such an interesting like.
Who'd you know?
He's
Wow.
winning. He's winning. I'm the table right now. I'm like,
It's a who you know situation.
you set yourself up for that one.
Oh, I did. No, but I think it's also the fact that there are so many different avenues in healthcare, and I think it's like, as you've said, like that those spaces are available in healthcare. You know, finding your niche and thriving in it can definitely pay off.
Yeah.
You know, as you know,
That's Jeff.
Jeff has like Jeff has
so
his business.
Yeah, so what I would say from the physician side, you know, I think part of the difficulty is a lot of physicians have a huge amount of loans, and when people who are not in medicine think about, wow, that doctor makes $250,000, they may owe $500,000
a ton of
more.
money, yeah.
Correct.
So I think sometimes it seems like they're probably making more than it feels like for the person.
And many years of their life.
I do
Like, I
think-
just want to add that in there because I think that the path to become a physician specifically is much longer than the path to do other things. So if you end up making even $400,000 a year, your path to that spot and cost of per year and including loans is much higher than somebody who is in finance.
Right.
Correct.
And I do think, you know, part of, I think this, are we making what we're worth, or this question, or, you know, someone can work at an organization where they're taking care of low-income patients and they're going to make less and maybe making a bigger impact.
Yeah.
Insurances and Medicare pay like a standard amount per patient that you see. And so if you're willing to see 100 patients in a day instead of 20, and take great care of the 20, you actually make more to see 100 and take horrible care of 100.
Right.
So
The
the
incentive-
incentives are bad. The incentives are.
It's not outcome based.
Correct.
The incentive is not outcome based.
It's actually
Which is terrible.
sick-based.
It's like
Yeah.
fee, like
It's sick-based.
it's the service that you provide. instead
it's
of like
not,
your outcomes.
because you could, if you have a waiting room with 30 people and your office never calls people back and you're booking 3 months out for an urgent visit, you make more than same day accommodating people, taking 30 minutes and spending time
because
with people.
it's all about volume more than
It's
anything.
the infrastructure of the
But
system.
there are ways around that. So there are, I think, becoming more direct primary care, concierge medicine that offers an alternative in the United States where people may want to have a type of practice where they can spend more time, and see doctors the same day, and then you're compensated appropriately.
And you're caring for the patients the way you would like to.
Yes.
Which is a huge statement.
That's kind of how dentistry is, like what you're describing. Outside of insurance, a lot of providers have opted to go like membership type of venue. So that way you can see the amount of patients you want to see. You can treat them the way you want to treat them and like how they deserve to be treated, but like the cost associated with that will reflect that. Right. And so there's an upside and a downside for that, unfortunately. In the work that I do, not in private practice, like in the public health sphere, the expectation is that you see as many people as you possibly can. Right. And it's just like boom, 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 boom. And I don't like that, but I do like the fact that I get to see a lot of patients, but it's just not the quality that like they deserve.
Which is like a moral dilemma.
Yeah.
It poses a dilemma.
Yeah.
Because you want to help people, because everyone here got into this whatever profession to help people.
Yeah.
And you're like, now I'm being told how I can help people.
Yeah. In the role that I'm in now, that I've just stepped into recently, like I can kind of change that because we just need to acknowledge that like we are severely understaffed, and like coming out of the pandemic, people were furloughed, like now we're trying to rebuild staff, and to expect to see the same amount of people that we've been seeing before that is just insane. Thankfully, like now I can say like, okay, like we can see less patients per day, but like give them the care that they actually deserve. Yeah.
I just finished residency at like a county hospital, and we would see hundreds of patients a day in our clinic, and we love providing like the care that we provide for them, and they wait hours for their appointments, but it's so hard to feel that we're working on getting more resources, but it's tough when you feel like the resources are limited and you want to spend more time with your patients, and sometimes you just have to get through making sure that you can help all of the patients that are waiting to see you. And it's such a tough balance between, you know, like how do I make sure that I'm providing care to everyone that needs care today, but also make sure that all of my patients get the time that I want to spend with them in that same day.
Yeah, I was like just speaking for like veterinarians. A lot of the times they're not making enough money to even pay off their debt ever, you know? And in human medicine, you do get that build up. Like you go through your years, you go through like the underpaid resident, and then like eventually you make money. But for veterinarians, like sometimes I've known some that are like 200 grand in debt, and they make maybe under $100,000 per year for the rest of their lives because they're not in the like specialty medicine, or they're large animal vets. Like it depends what field you're in. Mainly like the veterinarians that are making money now are like ER vets in big cities or like specialists and stuff, but the rest of them are, you know, making not as much as you would expect. And people expect that we do make a lot of money, but really what we went into it is just, you know, like loving animals and like veterinary medicine, so it's a little bit different. Yeah.
I could literally go on. I was trained the other day, so I'm in NP school right now, and I was taught by a physician who pays the most out of insurance, who can be seen for X, Y, and Z amount of time, who can, if you need to do another thing, can you do it in that visit, if they have to make another visit. What kind of care we can provide is dictated by somebody who doesn't give care. Companies, insurance companies. And then that you actually have to list through, give them all of these different things and code everything exactly correctly, because you'll make this much versus this much, and like the overhead people are asking, and I was like, this is not something I've ever learned in school. She's like, you're gonna need to know this. It's like, it's a game.
Because it's like one mistake in your coding, the entire visit can be denied.
We're bringing in, you know. But what this translates into is some patients get safe care and some patients get rushed care. And it could potentially cause issues with patients. And it definitely, I mean, this is in a more clinic setting. In hospital setting, it's a whole different ballgame. But do you feel comfortable and safe in the work environment that you're in, and what can be done to promote safety, especially in higher risks risk settings?
A big part of it is staffing. Like, there's always that, but and it's a general situation that everybody's short-staffed, right? And you put in efforts to, get more travelers or whatever, or recruit more physicians. But the common thread that I've noticed from talking with various physicians, nurses, is that number one is they don't feel supported, and number two is that they can't do the work that they need to do because they're expected to do other job duties as assigned. And there's a long list of them, right? So there's that burnout component to it that makes it feel like I can't really do what I came in here for. Is the work I'm doing worth it? Because I have to do all of these things that I didn't really come in here for. It's like, yeah, obviously it's part of the job, but you get frustrated because, like, I want to take care of people and I don't get to do that.
Do you think that affects the safety?
Oh, 100%, because now they're focusing on doing the clerical work, the administrative work, rather than the doctoring, the nursing, the medicining part of it. So
the
it's
caring for patients part.
Yeah.
Which is what everyone wants to do, is come in every day to give good care to our patients.
Yeah. Adam, how's the ER?
So
Tell us how you really feel.
It's a really, I think that going back to the value question, it's a bit more complex because it's not necessarily just a number. Like there's not a number you could pay me that I'll feel valued, because it's a much more complex. For example, the ER I work in right now, I feel valued by the people in charge. Like, I don't feel undervalued, but it has nothing to do with what I'm being paid, because I have friends from my residency who are at jobs that work similar hours but make so much more money than I do. They feel less seen. They feel more burnt out, and we talk, and that's one of the ways we maintain our mental health, is that constant communication. I don't know if it's so much a pay issue as how you're treated factors in more. And similarly, when I was in residency, the hospital I worked at, we dealt with a lot of people who didn't have insurance, a lot of people who saw the ER as their only access to health care. And I was making so little money to live in New York at the time, but I never felt more valued as a healthcare provider, because I would see patients that were so grateful to and they would wait and see. So it becomes for me, it's a really complex question.
Yeah.
And I wish I knew what the answer was. I don't think
there's one answer, because I understand what you're saying. I think that value is personal.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. It's very environmental. I think it's also, you're getting a lot of value from doing the work that you love and having the patients value your work.
Yeah.
So the value is coming primarily through the patients, and then you work in a supportive environment, which is also very helpful. So the money becomes less important, and I think the money becomes more important when the opposite's happening.
Yeah.
Totally.
To make it worth your while.
I think the pandemic actually highlighted that. So I was in New York City when it started, and it was terrible, like so bad. But for the first few months when it was at its worst, I've never felt more supported as a healthcare provider, because the whole city came together and they were supporting us, and I was getting texts and calls from people checking in on me, and I really felt like the work I was doing was important. There were obviously a lot of traumatic things that happened that I still carry and walk around with, but then towards the second half of the pandemic, when it became almost more of a political situation, that's when the public opinion sort of turned. And that is when it became the hardest to deal with from a mental health standpoint, because at that point then I had all the trauma from what I actually saw and did in the hospital, in addition to feeling like I had now become almost an enemy or a target. I'd have patients getting mad at me for things that really have nothing to do with what I was trying to do. And when the public opinion turned, because before the pandemic, I didn't, things were just the way they'd always been. And then suddenly, right at the beginning, everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, thank you! I really appreciate you," and it felt good. It's exactly what we needed to keep pushing through. And then when that turned again, it was sort of like a roller coaster. So one of the reasons I got into medicine was my grandfather was a doctor, and he really was just like, he saw anyone. People would come to our house and he'd see them in our house. They'd pay him in, you know, fruit and vegetables if whatever they could. And I would see that appreciation and the respect he had and how much he loved to do it. That was one of the things that pushed me into medicine. There is sort of a concept of this notion that people go into medicine because it's lucrative. It really isn't when you compare it, you know, when you compare it to what, you know, if you just graduated college and you went to any other job and, you know, worked your way up. It's not, you know, you do make a comfortable living, and I will never deny that.
Yeah.
If your driving factor is money, you've made a
wrong choice.
It's
You
like
made
there's
a
so
bad
many
choice.
other ways if you use the
Get
same
to the
effort.
money or easier another way.
Yeah, I'm not
amount of work
denying
that you put
that
in.
like you make a comfortable living, but like if you're willing to put that much effort into something, you could make a
The
much
trade-off is extreme.
The
the
trade-off.
trade-off is extreme.
Yeah.
And so I feel like having met so many people like through different specialties, different fields, the one thing that they've always had in common, no matter how much I talk to them, whether I like them or I don't like them, I can always tell that the reason comes back to that wanting to help people or animals.
I agree with so much of what you're saying. I think us people in general look for fulfillment in whatever way, and we find that in different avenues. Some people do put a lot of value on money. Like they do find fulfillment from making more money, seeing that salary go up. But obviously that's very external. It's very dependent on something else. But yeah, the value that we get, the fulfillment we get from helping people is also there. And I agree with you. I remember, I don't know if you guys had this too, but during the pandemic, around 7 p.m., I think, people would go outside or to their doors or their windows, and they would clap or they would bang pots and pans because that was shift change for nurses. And so they were cheering on nurses as they were leaving home or coming back from their shift. The expectation that's put on sometimes it varies, right? Some people are grateful and you do feel fulfillment when they thank you. And then some people are not. Some people are the opposite, or they're having a bad day, they're the emerge, they're having a bad day, and they sometimes take that out on the healthcare worker, and things get political as well, and that doesn't make it any easier. I think the other hard part is that sometimes the expectation for healthcare workers is like we have to be grateful. Like we are in a position of privilege, which I agree, and I think it is good to be grateful, but we can have bad days at our job too. There's days that I hate my job. There's days that I'm like, this isn't fun, this sucks, you know? I don't feel fulfilled today. And I think you're allowed to feel that way, but obviously finding fulfillment or like deciding on what you actually value makes it a lot easier to stay motivated in that profession. And if money's the only thing, then it's not sustainable.
No.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I think also I did a lot of work during COVID, and as Adam said, like the value that you have during that time is like I felt very much value during that time. I was in charge of vaccine clinics, and it was like you're like a star because like everybody was like, I need the vaccine. It was like there was like that thing of like I'll pay you money, and I was like no, I can't take it. No, it was like, but.
They're trying to tip you.
It's like, it was insane. Yeah. Like people were offering when people found out. It's like I was in charge because I had like 4 clinics. Some like total of it, like we could like vaccinate like 11,000 people in a day. And,
oh wow, that's a lot.
And it was when people found out, and I really tried my best not to make it known because like I knew like the ramifications of it. Of like, can I get it? Can I get it? Can I get it? Can I skip the line or whatever?
The line for me outside your house.
Oh yeah, like, I would get like calls from random people like or money offered, and it's like it's crazy. So you're like, oh, this is great. It's like this fills my cup because like now people are seeking it. Like people are seeking the care, and that this work is very fulfilling. Like now I feel valued. But then when the tide turned, and it's like, do I still need that vaccine? I was like, why are you still pushing for it? Especially like after like when we had to do the boosters and all that stuff. I was like, do we have to do that? Do I have to take that still? Like, is that necessary? I feel like you're just collecting money at this point. I was like, number 1, we haven't collected money, and number 2, we actually have been giving you subsidies and credit so that you come in to get vaccinated type of deal. When that tide turned, I was like, oh, now they're trying to fight me. They don't want me no more.
It was a hard time.
It was definitely a hard time.
Speaking of hard times, Has there ever been a time where you were able to lean on a coworker, colleague, classmate, or mentor as a support system? I think the answer probably for all of us is yes. I hope it is. And how did they help you through it? Did they even know that they were helping you?
So I'm the only dentist at the clinic that I work in. It's full of NPs or PAs or nurses or MAs. There are a lot of different other health professionals, but I would run into problems or just run into like situations that really only another dentist would understand. And so I would literally just like call my friend either on my lunch break or like on the drive home and just like dump everything. And so like, but like she gets it because she's going through something similar where she's working. That's so important to have someone there to, one who understands what you're going through, because like, even though my partner's super supportive, like he doesn't get it. He's not in healthcare, he's not a dentist, he's just not, he wants to be there, but he just can't in that capacity, as well as like my other friends. And so it's just really important to have someone that understands the struggle and like that you can like lean on.
I completely agree. I think for me, I just finished 4 years of residency, and it was a very challenging 4 years. The first year was COVID, and when COVID hit, and then after that, for me was ophthalmology residency, which was very challenging just because the learning curve is really steep, and I was at a county hospital where we see a very high volume of patients. And I think for me, people that didn't know that they were supporting me were my patients, because our patients are they're amazing. They're so grateful, they're so nice, and they always acknowledge that, you know, that they see the work that we're doing in the clinic. They see us, they see how hard all of the doctors and the nurses in the clinic are working to take care of them. And I think that they didn't even know or realize how much support and inspiration they gave us when they would just take a moment and like tell us that, you know. And I wouldn't even realize it until I like had that conversation with them, and they would ask like, do you sleep? Like, are you eating? Like, did you eat lunch today? And it's like it was just so, it was so thoughtful of them when they saw how busy we were in our clinic. And then same thing as you, I think I had really great co-residents that I went through residency with, and that was very critical. I think it's really important to be able to share in like the ups and the downs of the training process that you're going through with the people around you.
Yeah, I feel like when I was a rotating intern, and there were like maybe 14 of us in our class, but like when you go through something that tough, it's like I'm bonded for life.
It's a trauma bond. You're trauma
bonded. Yeah. Whatever I go through in life, I'm calling them like, I need to talk to you, and like just cry.
That group chat.
Yeah. Because they get it.
Yeah. They get it. Yeah, they really do.
This goes on to what you were actually just talking about, which is a supportive work culture. That's a good example.
Yeah.
Tell us what a good culture at work means to you, and if there's a real game changer, anything that made you feel like specifically seen or supported. It's not pizza.
It's not pizza.
Wait, it's not?
It kind of is pizza, a little bit.
A sliver?
Sometimes.
A sliver of pizza?
Yeah.
Warm pizza at least.
Warm,
Yeah,
at least.
warm pizza.
Well, not if you're night shift.
Cold. You get the leftovers. Yeah.
I think having a really good group of people, and what we were talking about earlier, just setting the culture and setting the vibe for the day. I think, you know, you set the tone for the day with your patients, with your coworkers, and really creating that atmosphere for a place where you know that people have a safe space to talk to you about what they're going through. And like, I know for me that when one of my co-residents opened up and shared, you know, how hard XYZ was, it opened this space for then me to share like how hard it was to go through the same thing. And so I think that creating like a positive culture where you are growing together and learning together and supporting each other side by side makes a huge difference.
There was a comedian I listened to. He said, I think the worst part about hell is not the torture, it's not getting breaks to talk about the torture. And I always think of that because that's what the ER is like, it's such a stressful place, like it's so crazy, but just having like, you know, the nurses you work with, the techs you work with, the other doctors, and the PAs and everyone just like look to you and be like, this is crazy, right? And you're like, yeah, this is so crazy.
Yeah, I'm not alone,
There's
right?
so much value.
Because you're all thinking it, and you're like,
There's so much
like,
value.
I'm not the only
it's
one,
like the whole
right?
place is burning down, and you're like, this is I don't know.
saw
And
that,
then
right?
someone looks
Yeah.
at you and they're like, this is crazy. And I'm like, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And then it just like.
Now we gotta do it again.
moves you
Yeah.
to-
Yeah,
it
yeah,
just
yeah.
gets
Gets
you
you through the day.
Yeah.
I
The shared experience is huge. If you are able to be in a place where you enjoy the people you work with and they have your back, that adds value to your job as well.
Definitely.
Totally.
I think knowing that, hey, I have your back, you have my back, and not even having to be able to ever say that, and just be like,
Yes.
somebody just sees you and they're like, this person needs my help.
Yeah.
Because I know this person.
Correct.
And to be known in that way, to like make eye contact and be like, this is fucking crazy,
Yeah.
is really important.
Super important.
And it does change the culture. Culture is everything when it comes to medicine because it's your team.
As much as, medicine is like a team sport, when you're doing your thing, it's like, oh my God, I just gotta do this. I gotta check the next box, check the next box, check the next box. And then when you take that pause, you're like, it's crazy, right?
Yeah, we're all going through
Like,
it.
are you crying? Did you cry? Because I just did. I was like, because if you didn't, then maybe it's just me.
Where do you go to cry at work?
I stopped.
You stopped crying?
I ran out of tears.
Oh, you're dry. You've gone dry.
I'm very dry now.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah.
I got
okay,
caught
though.
in the
No, you get a consult.
I'll check your eyes. Don't worry.
in like the janitor's closet. I was in there.
Oh, no,
once.
there's
they,
a
like,
treat.
opened it up.
There's
they
a
just
treat.
Closed it.
There's a
they
treat.
just closed it. Everyone just walked away. No one even came.
I go to
It was fine.
a work bathroom. I used to go to like a work bathroom.
That seems too public.
Oh no, it was like hidden. It was hidden. It was across, and I was like, one time, like one of my coworkers like entered there, and I was like literally like taking like a bad phone call, and I was like, and he was like, "You okay?" I'm like, yeah. And I was like, "All right."
Yeah, that's the teamwork. Yeah. Yeah, the nurses just closed in. They're like,
Yeah.
she's gonna be in there.
Yeah,
She's
okay.
We're checking. Okay. Has there been a patient, moment, or experience that gave meaning to the sacrifices you made to get to the profession that you were in?
The hard part, it's every day, it's every shift. The hard part is recognizing it. Pulls back to just how we're wired. I'll see that, if I see 100 patients a week, the only one I'm thinking about is the one that I wasn't happy about something happened to.
Yeah.
And then I miss like the 99 good things that happen. Like someone's a little kid with a broken arm and I set their arm and got them back up and going. Don't even think about that. That's my job. That I had to do that. I only think about
The
like the
what-ifs.
one, like, either like bad outcomes or things I wasn't happy about. I really struggled with my mental health for about, always, but 2 years from like COVID onwards, and it was really slowing myself down, not focusing on like just the macro and just trying to take it like interaction at a time, and really making a point at the end of the day to be like, that was a good interaction. I enjoyed helping that person, and I did help that person. You focus so much on the negative that you see it as a negative, but there are just so many small interactions, and I'm lucky because I have to interact with so many people. And when I really think about it, there are so many great interactions in the year, like truly thankful people, truly people you've helped, truly people that help you. There's a lot of patients that help you in like little things they do, just seeing you as a person and not someone who's supposed to be there. Like, are you okay? Like, have you eaten? I've seen you run around so much. How have you not passed out? And you're like, oh yeah, oh my gosh.
You're like, you haven't peed for 12 hours.
Yeah, I was like, they'll say something like, I haven't even like seen you go to the bathroom, and it's really.
Because you're so dehydrated.
Yeah, I was like, you have to drink and eat to do that. So it's things like that. It's very hard to get distracted by that, but there's just so many great interactions every day. And if you can, every time, if you have you're hyper focused on me, if you can just pull yourself out and say like, let me think of the other 10 patients. You don't even have to think of a good interaction, because the reason you're not thinking about those patients is because they were good interactions.
I'm going to piggyback on that. I'm actually going to spin what you think is negative into what I think is one of the most positive things about every practitioner, provider that I know will stay up thinking about that one lab value, that thing that they didn't send, the what if, and what that means to me is that you give a shit. I think that speaks to you being in the right spot, in the right profession, and that you care a lot about your patient outcomes. And I don't know if people know that. And I don't think that patients understand that we carry them home. when work stops, we are still thinking about them and their outcomes. And could we have done that better? Is there something we missed? And I think it's really interesting that we all have that, like, you're nodding a lot.
Yeah. No, I agree.
that I'm sure you think about, like, oh, what did I miss, or what could I have done better? And I think that speaks volumes about the kind of people that we are in our professions.
I think I agree.
Good.
Sorry, I know that I agree. Yeah, of course.
Well, let's talk about
He was
the
gonna
failures
just-
in your statement.
Let's talk about that lab.
Yes, that lab that you missed last week. Was it
call
2 weeks
it.
ago?
You should just do better is all I'm saying.
Sounds like you're a bad doctor. I don't know.
You
You
did some lactate.
The repeat lactate.
Sorry.
this one patient story, for some reason it sticks out to me. In the ER, we do a lot of lacerations. There was this young girl that came in and was scared of needles, scared of me, scared of the place, scared of everything. And it took a lot of more time to try to get her to a place where she would allow me to even get close to her. But that time wasn't me just kind of sitting like this waiting. It was like, let's talk. Tell me your favorite friend. Who's your best friend? What do you do at school? And then she let me stitch her up, and things were going smooth. And then her mom said, this is great. Like she never really opens up to strangers. And in that moment, I felt like almost like crying. I don't know why. It just was like, oh, like this is nice. Like we can not only make a difference by like stitching people up, but I also like making people feel safe in an environment when like they don't feel safe. Like they're in the hospital. It's something's gone wrong for you to get there. But you're safe here. We're going to take care of you. And even though this needle's next to your face, like you trust me, this person you don't even know, to do this thing.
Because you spent time gaining her trust.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And sometimes it's easy to be like, oh, that's my job. That's what I'm supposed to do. But maybe not. Some people might just be like, all right, let's hold her down, and I'm gonna stitch her, right? And right. So it's good to like celebrate those things. I hope people don't do that. I don't know. It happens.
I looked over this.
Sometimes you can't listen to them. You're the ER. But just celebrating those things and sharing them and telling other people, like, hey, like this is something that I'm happy about. Like, you should tell me your story. What's your story? And then you get to appreciate those things more.
So a lot of my patients are homeless. They generally just have like distrust in the medical field, period. And then also just like interpersonal distrust, because like they have to be on guard a lot when they're in the shelters and things like that. And so like they come with a lot of baggage, like when they get to my chair. I had to tell this patient that we were going to pull out all of your teeth at the top. Every single tooth is gone. And so like that's, for someone to hear that, that's like, absolutely not. Like, and so like I spent a lot of time like just like talking and like gaining the trust, because like they have to trust you to buy into that level of treatment, because it's life-changing. Like, I'm gonna take all your teeth now. Basically did a full mouth rehab on her, and like she cried real tears, like when we delivered the denture and all of that, and then gave me a hug. I get a lot of hugs, a lot more hugs than you would think.
I'm so jealous.
I didn't realize we were showing off.
No, but
She's like, do you want to count my hugs?
Is hugs currency now? Because
That's her value. That's her value.
I literally said we started. People tell me that they hate me all the time. So like, to
we've
work
moved
my
on
way
now to the hugs.
Wait, do they start with,
It's a lot.
are these the same people?
These are people. I mean,
That started with I hate you and then they moved to hugging you?
They were basically. She said no. Like she told me flat out, "You're not doing that." And so I was like, "Okie dokie. Let me just gain this trust over time." And so it took her a while to like agree to the treatment, but she did. But I say all that to say that like it's those moments like when you make the breakthrough and it's like, oh, like I reached this person, like that. Those are the ones that are like, okay, this makes it all worth it.
Everyone's talking about human connection.
Worth it.
Yeah.
Mary, I would, and not to say, I think that human connection is actually a very important part for your job as well, and you can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it's true.
But earlier you were telling me about how, and actually all of us, about how it's hard doing like euthanizing a pet and then going to next room, but I would imagine that you're actually a very important part of that process for people.
Yeah, actually, I feel like I experienced that a lot last year when I was an ER vet, because a lot of people bring their pets into the hospital when they're like critical, you know, and they're like pretty much on their deathbed, unfortunately. But like, as much as euthanasias are hard, that's actually one of the most memorable and fulfilling parts of being a veterinarian. I feel like it depends on how you look at it, but you have to like see the positives in it, because you're facilitating something that is super difficult for people, and you're also getting to see the human-animal bond, which for me makes me like super emotional when I get to see that. Like, I think some of the most memorable cases were like, for example, a cat that I saw in ER, I diagnosed lymphoma in it, and then we scripted out pred because they didn't want to do anything like radiation or chemotherapy, so it pretty much went home with its owner, spent some time there, and then got some extra, like maybe like a 2-week timeline to spend more time with their owner. And then, you know, they said they called the veterinarian. They have mobile veterinarians now that'll come to your home and perform at-home euthanasias that are really intimate and nice. So even that field is very niche and not a lot of people know about it. But they actually got to spend that time, and then before the mobile veterinarian got to their home, the kitty passed away. But like, they sent me a picture of them like literally like passed away in my arms, and I was like blubbering like a baby, especially after like really long, you know, like shifts at the hospital. But it felt really good that I was able to give them more time.
I think that we all are speaking to just human connection as like the things that are the most important and the things that we make the most meaning and bring us the most meaning to our sacrifices. What's a seemingly small moment or gesture where you feel like you've made an impact, or vice versa? I think you just spoke to that.
Yeah.
And it's not a small moment, but it's like even those decisions of sitting there and like trying to figure out a plan of care, knowing the end game is near.
Yeah.
I mean, we all were kind of just talking about that in like different ways, but
when you show up to a veterinary hospital, it's different than human hospitals because they don't treat you automatically. Sometimes you have to know like how much finances is there to take care of this animal, because animals are property and not so much, you know, considered like a life like a human's.
Right.
So that part is hard, especially when you have like really sick animals that like need a lot of treatment and they don't have pet insurance, and then we have to make split decisions. So like, you know, talking to owners and coming up with that plan, that's one aspect of it, for sure. Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in the ICU. I primarily was an ICU nurse before going back to school, and I have one story that came to me years after I dealt with a patient. I had cared for a patient in New York City. I worked in a neuro ICU, and she was pregnant, had an aneurysm burst, and was out, like would squirm around in bed, but like wasn't communicating at all. And she was my primary patient for a few months. And I asked her family what music she liked, and like would play music that she liked every day and talk to her and tell her updates on her baby and like what was going on. I'd bathe her and all this different stuff. And years later, one of the residents who I worked with that patient, said the patient came back and found him and told him her story. She had made a complete recovery, had a healthy baby, had to learn how to eat, talk, do everything again. She was my age at the time, so she's in her 30s now, but he found me on Facebook and messaged me and was like, the patient wants to let you know, thank you for playing that music and telling her about the baby.
Wow.
So
And I feel like those are like the little tiny moments where it's just like a message that comes through, but like that validates like a lot of work that you put, and you never know, you don't know that they can hear you or that they know anything that's going on. So I love hearing about patients doing well and people doing well in the future. So that's my little thing to add there. How do you guys feel like you learn and grow best?
It's
not
books.
books.
What's a book?
I'm like, I can tell you for certain it is not a book.
I think it's not a book. I think it's experience. I think for me, learning how to operate and becoming a surgeon is like a huge learning curve. And you know, you work on it for years, you train up for the process, but it is a scary process as you start, because you want to be the best that you can, and you want to do the best that you can for your patients. And I think that for me, the growth in that came from experience, and I think that that's what pushed me, and the people around me, and the people training me, and my patients. Like, I remember my first cataract surgery. Of course, you always have support with you, but and your patients know, you talk to them and you let them know that you're a starting surgeon. And my patient looked to me and said, I trust you. Like, I know you've worked hard. I know you can do this. Like, I'm trusting you with my eyes. It's very exciting and it's very moving, right? It's like a very important moment for your patient and their vision, and it's a privilege to be able to be there, but you grow through that experience. Like, you're growing with that patient, you're growing with your mentors and attendings who are training you, and I think that growth comes from working through hard experiences and really pushing and really putting in the time and the work.
For me, I think it's talking to people. You push yourself to learn as much as you could from the people who you're going to make that change for, because they're the ones doing the work. They're the ones you expect to continue on and push through with the change, and understanding where they're coming from and understanding the purpose behind why they do what they do, and trying to get them to buy in is what pushes me to learn, to grow. Now I know a little bit more about like respiratory therapy. Like, I now know more about like what ED physicians experience, just so the changes that I am expected to push forward, I can customize it to like their learning, their like how they do their flow, how do they do their work. Because if I'm just trying to go against that grain, what's the point? It's just going to be a lot of pushback. A lot of that happens when I talk to people and try to understand, like, why do you do what you do, and what is expected of you. Like, I need to learn how you're going to implement that in your job, so that we as a team, we as an organization can do better.
What are we most hopeful about in healthcare and how it's moving? What are the things that are good that are happening?
The human connection, which I know
was
we talked about a lot.
first. I was like,
Yeah. No. I think it's the
Next question. No.
I think the human connection, like you talked about earlier, it's the core to healthcare. It's that we want to connect and we want to help each other through these hard experiences or whatever it is our bodies are struggling through. And the human connection will always be, hopefully, the core of healthcare and medicine.
I think human connection's always been the drive for everybody in life.
Yeah.
Just like in the world.
In the world, yeah.
We thrive in communities, and exile was used because of that.
Totally.
As a punishment. But we are at a very interesting time where we're very disconnected and also very connected in the very same moment. I'm hopeful that we would come together more in real life and more as human to human, because I think that we actually share a lot of the similar concerns and like want to change some culture things, especially in healthcare for the future, because we can't exist the way we've been and evolve or die, right?
Yes.
Totally.
Things like this.
Yeah, things like
Yeah.
this, exactly.
This type of discussion 20 years ago would not happen. I would probably feel as a doctor, or if we had a resident, I would be too scared to say anything. And I know people in other specialties and fields feel the same way. Just the fact that we're at this point where we can share how we're feeling, we can point out some of the issues and problems that we have. That's definitely the right direction. So that's what I'm hopeful for. And I think if we continue doing that and really focusing on the issues, we can probably make some progress.
Yeah.
I think one thing I'm hopeful about is it sounds like for most of us that despite all the things that have been a struggle or hard to go through, probably most of us would do it again and have enjoyed the process. And so I think even small changes will still make it worthwhile for the next generation of people to go through the same thing. I also think as technology changes, the role of the doctor is going to change in many respects. And so there's going to actually, I think AI and computers may take on a lot of the diagnosis sort of part of it, and hopefully part of the charting and all the stuff we don't want to do, and then maybe there can be more time for the doctor to be sitting with the patient. That's something I'm hopeful can be the case.
There seems to be more emphasis on feeling, like how we do feel, and I think there's been sometimes some contentions between that. You know, how does how you feel, how much does that matter? And I think we are getting to a point where, or how a patient feels matters, but also how we feel matters. And then I think every human just wants their feelings to be validated, to feel like how they feel isn't, you know, out of proportion or that it's unreasonable. Like, you can feel the way you feel.
Last question. What drives you to dedicate your life to serving others?
The money.
Mary, what
Well,
do you want
yes.
to say?
And take two.
Sorry, cut that out.
I feel like for me it started because I love animals, you know? Like, I had pets ever since I was, like, probably, I don't know, since I was born. So that was what drove me. But then eventually when I started working, the human-animal bond, because I know you guys are all about the human-human, but, like, for me, it's that. And, like, seeing that and getting to help the animal and the human now has become incredibly fulfilling.
Historically speaking, there was a gap between certain patients and certain providers. And so for me, a lot of the times I feel like I'm standing in that gap, as acknowledged to me by my patients telling me so. Being able to tangibly make a difference in someone's life and, like, quality of life after they leave my care, like, that's huge. And I don't think a lot of different professions get to say that at the end. Like, I made an impact on someone's, like, quality of life moving forward.
On, like, a day-to-day basis too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. For me, it's about witnessing. I don't think that you can always do things for people. And I don't think that everyone comes to you to do something for them. But I do think that it's really important to witness humanity in each spot. So even if it's just witnessing suffering or validating what they're going through or giving them a diagnosis, and it's a hard diagnosis, and be able to sit there with them, I think that's where it's at. Like, celebrating the wins.
Yeah.
I think those moments are what keep me going, at least.
The big thing that keeps me going is the fact that you see people being more resilient nowadays. Like, it's more visible, right? Their resiliency is more visible, they're powering through more things, and also the fact that people are doing things because of instead of in spite of. And visibly doing things because they want to do it and they love it, instead of, I'm just trying to survive. Us healthcare workers have an impact on that, whatever it may be. This is exciting. You know, it's like when there's more focus and wanting to do better for themselves is the exciting part.
And how
of
you
it.
can support them in
Yeah.
that.